Shortly after the big day, Mike brought up me in a chat. If you can't tie the knot with someone you're head over heels for, just link up with someone who's down to follow. Turns out the reason he wouldn't even look my way was because he already had someone else on his mind. When I was backed into a corner with no escape, I set my eyes on the guy crashing at Mike's pad. He kept it low key, spent his days copying holy texts, and stayed clear of worldly stuff, dodging the ladies. I charmed him and busted his promise. 3 months later, I was over the moon to find out I was expecting. Mike flipped out. Samantha, who did you get it on with? Later, I signed those divorce papers and went solo to the clinic for an abortion. But not a single doc in town would handle the procedure. And the dude, I figured was just a guest at Mike's place, rolled out of a fancy ride and blocked my path. Samantha, if you don't want me or our kid, you won't find a colder chick in the world. Right after breakfast, Mike's mom hit us up to meet in her study. Samantha, you've been hitched for 3 months now. Time to think about kids. She gave me the cold shoulder, looking at me like I was the worst daughter-in-law ever. I wasn't the daughter-in-law she envisioned. I only married Mike because his grandma dug my vibe. Naturally, she wasn't fond of me, but having a baby wasn't just my call. Mike had someone else in his heart and wouldn't get close to me. Who'd believe that 3 months into my marriage, I was still a virgin? Your family took $1 billion as a bride price from Mike's fam. You married into this house and we treated you like a queen. But look at you, still no signs of baby making. Mike's mom's words got harsher, making me anxious. I glanced at Mike for backup. Mike ignored me, stood up with a lazy grin. If she can't get knocked up, why not see a doc? It's her body's issue, not mine. If she can't have a kid, they better sort it out. After all, doesn't her fam deal with all sorts of shady biz? Mike dipped, ditching me in the study. Samantha. Mike's mom was pissed and started tearing me apart again. If you're not pregnant in 6 months, better split from Mike. If you can't win Mike's heart or have a kid, we don't need a daughter-in-law like you. We'll give back half the bride price. That's us being fair. I couldn't explain my pain. Out of the $1 billion bride price, I only got $1 million. Bet the rest went to cover my family's debts. Nobody was going to help me return that $50 million. My parents wouldn't take me back or back me up. They were pushing me to hit a dead end. But why should I let them call the shots? The marriage was Mike's grandma's call, not mine. It wasn't my fault Mike had someone else and wouldn't get close. My parents' business flops weren't on me. Yet, in the end, all the blame was on me, feeling bitter with no one to talk to. Since my mom died years ago, I didn't have a spot in my family anymore. Unknowingly, I ended up in Mike's backyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky a deep red. I stared at the sky, feeling totally lost about what's next, tears streaming down my face. In the distance, the little courtyard suddenly swung its gate open. That guy in plain gray clothes showed up in the thick dusk, walking towards me. For a sec, I thought I saw a ghost. Took me a bit to remember that Mike's fam had a distant cousin. He came from the south for medical stuff and was staying at this courtyard for now. Must be him. Didn't expect this guy to be so easy on the eyes. His everyday threads were soft and slightly worn, fitting his tall and sleek frame perfectly. In the deep blue twilight, his slightly pale face was smooth and flawless. The hand offering a handkerchief had long, slender fingers, like jade pipes. I noticed a string of blood-red coral beads on his slim wrist. Somehow, I asked, "You feeling better?" His cold but calm stare met mine. I'd been crying hard, my nose red, long lashes still wet with tears, about to drop. To my surprise, he reached out and gently wiped my tears. "Better," he said, his Mandarin a bit off with a strong southern accent. I was kinda taken aback but nodded. "Yeah, that's good. Winters up north are brutal. You must not be used to it." "It's okay, just a bit dry, not quite adjusted." "You need a humidifier." He nodded. "Thanks." I wiped my tears, gave him a deep look, and stood up. "It's late, I should head back." Leo said no more, watched me walk away, disappearing into the dark night, my slim, lonely silhouette making me look so isolated and cold. Leo had heard a few things from the servants. Mike's new wife was super quiet and obedient, a lady among ladies, but sadly, Mike didn't vibe with her. Besides Mike's seriously sick grandma, his fam didn't like her either. He couldn't help but think back to how she cried earlier. Her sobs were soft and held back, but so painful. His gentlemanly upbringing was strong, making him wonder why such an obedient girl wasn't loved. That night, I couldn't sleep until dawn when the thought fully sank in. Finally zonked out, Mike said I should find my own way to have a kid, that I had all sorts of tricks. So I decided to actually use those tricks for once. I only had 1 million left now. If I gave 1 million to the guy living under someone else's roof, for him to give me a kid, it's a fair deal. He'd probably say yes, right? Before crashing deep, I felt his fingertips' warmth again. That moment he wiped my tears. He was really gentle. But on my fourth visit to that small courtyard, Leo stood at the gate and for the first time, didn't let me in. He looked down and didn't glance my way. It's late, not a good time to let you in. Don't come here anymore. Avoid catching any germs. I stood on the steps, looking up at him. I'm not leaving. Leo pressed his lips together, but still didn't look at me. The cold wind went through my thin coat, making me cough nonstop. Yet I stubbornly refused to bounce. A few minutes later, he seemed to give in and glanced at me. He stepped aside a bit to let me in. His room was as warm as spring, with books and pens on the desk, and the small humidifier I gave him last time was still there. Leo ignored me and walked to his desk, still writing. The red coral beads on his wrist wound around his slender arm, both pure and sexy. I couldn't help but reach out to touch them. He paused a bit, but didn't pull away. Why you wear these beads? I asked. I was sick as a kid. An elder got them for me at a temple. Can they bring you good luck and keep you safe? It's just for peace of mind. He tried to pull his arm back, but I held on to the beads. Has any other woman touched your beads? Leo was silent for a sec, then shook his head. No. Has any other woman touched you? Leo's eyes, dark as obsidian, opened slightly. After a few seconds, he looked away, avoiding my gaze, his ears turning red, and his voice got a bit rough. No, there was a soft couch behind his desk. He usually used it for naps, but now, Leo, wearing only light gray traditional clothes, was underneath me on that couch. His fingers, used to holding a brush, were now gripping my waist. Maybe because of the heat, my cheeks were flushed, and my body was on fire. But Leo felt like a piece of consistently warm, smooth jade. Getting close to him made me feel cozy inside. Since I was little, I'd only had a secret crush on a transfer student in my teens. Thinking about it now, that transfer student was also skinny and handsome. Quiet, courteous to everyone yet distant. He reminded me a bit of Leo. I heard you're heading back south after the new year. Yeah. Will you be back? Not sure. Don't come back. It's not good here at all. I looked down at him. Are you fully recovered? Almost. I'll give you some money so you can go back and chill. I slowly lowered my head, our breaths mingling. Is that cool? His gaze shifted, the once gentle eyes turning cold. Next moment, he tried to push me away, so I just threw myself into his arms, kissing him. Tears fell silently as I choked and pleaded. I'll give you money. You give me a kid. Just help me out once, okay? The red coral beads on his wrist left marks of varying depth on my waist, inner thighs, and chest. I cried softly, scratching faint blood marks on his shoulder and back. Samantha, Leo stopped, looking at me in disbelief. How? Mike never touched me. He's got someone he likes. Samantha. Deep pain spread in Leo's eyes. Luckily, I don't love him either. I raised my arm again, wrapping it around Leo's neck. I just want a kid. Leo didn't answer, just kissed me deeper, his cool beads pressed against my cheek. My tears welled up from the corners of my eyes and slowly dripped onto them. He kissed my tears away tenderly. When everything was done, I dressed up to leave. Leo walked me out. When we reached the gate, I turned back and smiled at him. I'll come again tomorrow night. These days are my fertile period. He said nothing, just lowered his gaze and buttoned my coat one by one. Finally, he gently helped me put my scarf on. Walk carefully. Don't twist your ankle. I found Leo 3 times in a row. The third time, he suddenly told me he had stuff at home and had to head back south early. I was a bit stunned, but still smiled lightly. Then I'll transfer the money to you tonight. And I acted all chill. I'd been really happy the past few days, so even if I didn't get knocked up, I'd still give him the full amount. Leo shook his head. I won't take it. I didn't say much, but inside I was set on giving it to him whether he was down or not. Once the money and goods were settled, we'd have nothing left between us. On the day Leo headed back to Hong Kong, Mike's fam, out of courtesy, hosted a farewell dinner for him. That night, I wore a dark green velvet dress, my hair half up, sitting beside Mike. Leo was right across from me. He didn't look at me the whole time, and I only greeted him politely when I took my seat. However, unlike his usual indifference, Mike seemed different tonight. Several times I felt Mike's gaze landing on me. It was even kind of burning and intense. Midway through the meal, he personally ladled chicken soup for me. When I softly thanked him, Mike suddenly leaned closer. His hand fell intimately on my shoulder, wrapping around me. There were still kiss marks from Leo on my neck, visible if you parted my hair. I nearly lost it and was about to stand up when suddenly Leo spoke up. Mike, maybe I was too nervous and imagined it. But the moment Leo spoke, Mike's hand withdrew instantly. He even straightened up in his seat obediently. Bro, I couldn't help but look at Leo. His gaze met mine. It was the first time. I saw him in a suit, looking so different, so dignified, like a cold, bright moon hanging in the sky. In contrast, I felt dirty and unworthy. I lowered my eyes, not daring to look at him again, but my heart ached a bit. You and your wife seem to have a good relationship, Leo said in a calm, low voice, no emotion. Under the table, my hand clenched suddenly. Mike laughed. Yeah, Samantha is so beautiful. I really like her. Leo also smiled, but it was faint. Indeed, Mike, you're lucky. I felt a moment of shock and bit my lip without thinking. My heart felt like an electric current passed through it, a sore and swelling pain. Mike seemed a bit surprised and frowned slightly. Leo continued, Mike, don't waste your luck. His gaze brushed past me, landing on Mike's face. Mike nodded with a smile. Fourth brother, I got it. By the way, how come you've been talking so smooth these days? Mike's mom also chimed in with a teasing smile. Rare to see Leo like this. Inside, my emotions were a complex mix I couldn't describe. Every word Leo said seemed to remind Mike to treat me well. But how could he know Mike's heart had long belonged to someone else? Our so-called marriage was like strangers, never to break the ice. After the banquet, Leo had to catch a flight to the airport. Mike held my hand, walking him out. The northern winter was freezing. I wrapped my shawl tighter but still shivered, sneezing twice in a row. Yet Mike didn't notice at all. Leo, walking ahead, suddenly stopped. He turned, his gaze lingering on me for half a sec. Then he said to Mike, It's cold outside. You guys should head back. How can we? Mike started to say, but Leo's calm voice held an inexplicable authority. No need, go back. Mike could only stop. Leo turned again and walked towards the car, not far away. It was then I dared to let my gaze fall on his back. With small snowflakes falling, his tall, slender figure in a black coat stood rigid but upright. He reminded me of resilient bamboo in a snowstorm. Before getting into the car, he looked back one last time. Through the flying snow mist, his handsome face was quiet and undisturbed. In the black and white world, the trace of red on his wrist stung my heart. Didn't know if he saw me, but soon he bent and got into the car. Standing next to me, Mike sighed lightly. Let's go inside. It's snowing hard. I slowly raised my eyes, watching the car disappear. I knew the past between Leo and me would be buried completely under this heavy snow, and for the rest of our lives, we might never meet again. Back in the room, for once, Mike didn't walk away quickly. He watched as I removed my shawl and took off my jewelry at the dressing table. Suddenly, he walked behind me, gently holding my shoulders. Samantha, you look good today. I didn't speak, just kept taking off my earrings. Mike leaned closer and unexpectedly whispered in my ear, Samantha, don't you want a kid? I found it laughable, how cheap and shallow such supposed deep feelings could be. But before I could respond, his phone rang. It was his first love, Jenny, calling. He went to the terrace to answer the call, and by the time he returned, I had already prepped his coat for going out. Mike looked displeased and eventually spoke slowly. You're not gonna stop me. I lowered my eyes, handing the coat to him. Go on. She's crying pretty bad. Don't let anything happen. Mike grabbed the coat and bounced, slamming the door. Mike's mom was obviously pissed, but couldn't bring herself to scold her son. Instead, she found an excuse to harshly reprimand me. That night, I came down with a high fever. I was sick for a week. During that week, Mike only came back once, stayed for half an hour, then dipped again. No matter how cold it was, I felt no waves in my heart, only an inexplicable sadness, making my recovery super slow. When the snow finally cleared on a sunny day, I felt a bit stronger and wanted to take a walk. Unconsciously, I wandered to the backyard. Leo's old place, the small courtyard, had its door ajar. I could faintly hear cleaning sounds inside. I stood outside in a daze for a long time until the young guy, who had been helping Leo, opened the door and spoke respectfully. Miss, Mr. Leo left this for you. He handed me a small brocade box. I was a bit stunned but still took it. Inside the box there was a card and a folded letter. I recognized the card. It was the one I placed under Leo's pillow the last night. It had all my savings, $1,000,000. The letter had only 2 short lines. Samantha, if you need anything, call me. I'll come to get you. Below was his signature and a string of phone numbers. Staring at those 2 lines, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. When Mike's grandma was critically ill, Mike's entire fam gathered at the hospital to visit. The room was full of her devoted kids and grandkids. Just as the elderly lady, feeling surprisingly well, asked for some fresh fish soup, I lost it and puked in front of her bed. Mike's fam immediately called for doctors and nurses to check on me. When they found out I was pregnant, the matriarch was over the moon. She announced that all her shares would go to Mike and the unborn great-grandchild. Mike's mom also changed her usual vibe, holding my hand lovingly. The room was filled with joy and laughter, except for Mike, who lost it the moment he heard I was pregnant, accidentally knocking over a cup. Mike's mom, fearing he might mess up the elderly lady, quickly asked him to take me back to the room to rest. As soon as we shut the door, Mike grabbed my neck and pushed me against it. Samantha, who did you let touch you? His eyes were bloodshot, and he was livid beyond measure. Ironically, I felt completely calm. You better make more noise. So the old lady hears and takes back the shares and inheritance. Then, this unspeakable scandal will spread all over North City. Let's see who ends up being embarrassed. Actually, I knew Mike's temper pretty well. Sure enough, as soon as I finished speaking, Mike's grip loosened a bit. I grabbed his wrist and pushed him away, then rubbed my neck where it had turned red from the choking. Then I chuckled lightly and looked at him. I remember very well. It was you who told me to figure out how to have a kid on my own, wasn't it? Samantha. Mike's eyes were filled with shock, like he was seeing me for the first time. In his eyes, I was always a dull, humble, obedient wife, like a puppet on strings. He couldn't believe I would do something so unbelievable. What shocked him even more, besides the anger and disbelief, was the feeling of dissatisfaction and jealousy in his heart. Who was the guy who made Samantha so beautiful and vibrant? She was supposed to be his wife, and the kid in her belly should have been his. But at this moment, Mike's phone rang abruptly. It was Jenny calling. When he answered, I faintly heard sobbing. Mike, I think I'm pregnant. Fate can be pretty ironic sometimes. Jenny, who wasn't accepted by Mike's fam because of her poor background and physical issues making it hard for her to conceive, was suddenly pregnant. She used the kid in her belly and her own life to force Mike to divorce me and marry her. Mike had been tangled with her for years, and now that she had a kid, he finally had something to fight against his parents with. Of course, he wasn't going to refuse. Thinking back, if Jenny had gotten knocked up earlier, things wouldn't have turned out like this. I'm sure Mike would have been down to give her and their kid a proper status and divorce me peacefully. I wouldn't have ended up shouldering a $50 million debt or dragging innocent Leo into this. I agreed to sign the divorce papers, leave with nothing, and not have to return the hefty dowry. And Mike wanted me to abort the baby after the divorce. Honestly, he didn't have to say it. I wouldn't have kept the kid anyway. I know how miserable it is to be a kid without parental love. No need for my kid to suffer the same pain. Moreover, after signing the divorce papers, leaving Mike's fam without that layer of protection, I was afraid the kid might drag Leo into this someday. I was the one who involved him. It was my move. He shouldn't bear the possible consequences. Mike's grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep the next day. While Mike's fam was busy arranging the funeral, Mike and I signed the divorce agreement. Mike held the pen tightly, his eyes filled with mixed emotions. Samantha, who's that guy? I looked at him calmly. I'm not gonna say, do you like him, right? I paused for a sec but still smiled and shook my head. It's none of your business using a good man so disgracefully. What right did I have to talk about liking him? Until the grandma's shares and inheritance matters were settled, I'd cooperate and not spill our divorce. I stood up to grab my suitcase. During this time, I'll still be staying at Mike's other house. Sorry for the hassle. Samantha, you never cared about me as your husband, did you? I held the suitcase handle and smiled at him peacefully. Mike, when I married you, I did think about living a good life with you. Mike snorted self-deprecatingly. You never cared about Jenny's existence, right? I looked down at the ground, not answering. What woman hasn't imagined a happy future with her hubby when getting married? I too had those silly hopes once, but I quickly woke up from those dreams. I'm out now. Take care. As I turned to leave, I could feel Mike's gaze on my back the whole time, but I never looked back. After moving to the other house, I started contacting the clinic to arrange for the surgery. But oddly, though we had a date set, the next day, the clinic called to cancel it and asked me to make an appointment at another place. When I asked why, they stammered and couldn't explain, and the call quickly ended. At first, I didn't think much. It wasn't until the same thing happened a second, third time, that I realized someone must be messing behind the scenes. I never thought about Leo. Until that day, I personally went to the clinic to get admitted and prep for the surgery to remove the baby, only to be rejected again. Even the director came when he heard about it. Samantha, it's not that we're unwilling to schedule the surgery for you. We really can't. Can't? Why not? I looked at the director, who was sweating bullets. The kid is mine. I have the right to decide whether to keep it or not. No one else has the right to decide. I'm having the surgery today. Otherwise, I'll sit here and not leave. I slowly sat down on the bench, emotions swirling. The kid was getting bigger every day, and that natural bond was making my heart soften by the day. I dreaded thinking about when he starts to develop features and tiny fingers. When he moves gently in my belly, would I still be able to bear terminating him? Seeing my determination, the director didn't insist and quickly left. Moments later, a nurse led me to a VIP suite. Samantha, please rest here for a while. The clinic is still discussing the surgery. Can I know who you're discussing with? The nurse just shook her head. Samantha, I'm sorry. I don't know anything. She left after speaking. I sat in the room till it got dark. Through the half-open window, I faintly heard car engines and noises. I moved my stiff shoulders and back, stood up, and went to the window. I looked down without meaning to and saw an expensive luxury car pull up slowly below. Behind the luxury car, there were 5 or 6 SUVs. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Thought it was just some big shot coming to the clinic. But when the bodyguard opened the car door, it was Leo who stepped out. Leo, the distant cousin of Mike's, who I thought had hit hard times. Leo, the sickly and poor guy I had once paid $1 million to conceive a kid with. Leo got out of the car and walked straight towards the small building where I was. After the initial shock, I had already figured everything out. Leo must have known about me and Mike signing the divorce papers. He also knew I wanted to ditch this kid. That's why no clinic dared to perform the surgery on me these past few days. It was all orchestrated by him. I grabbed my bag and turned to leave, just as Leo stepped out of the elevator. I was about to walk into the one next to it. Our eyes met. I quickly averted my gaze and hurried into the elevator, but he reached out and gently grabbed my wrist. Samantha, it's still that thin, jade-like wrist, still those blood-red coral beads, still the same face, the same person, but somehow he seemed like a complete stranger. I pulled my hand away and kept walking into the elevators, but Leo grabbed my wrist again. Samantha, let's talk. His grip tightened a bit. I tried to pull free but couldn't. The hallway was empty, didn't know since when. I looked into his eyes, my face pale. Leo, what do you want to talk about? Leo stared at me for a few seconds. When he finally spoke, his first word was sorry. It was my fault, Samantha. I should have taken you with me when I left Mike's place instead of leaving you behind. Take me with you. Why? In what capacity? As Mike's distant cousin you were staying with? Or as the Leo you are now, who I know nothing about but seems unreachable? I shook off his hand and took a step back. The night I gave you that $1 million, our deal was over. Now whatever I do has nothing to do with you. But Leo, you were the one crying to me, saying you wanted a kid. that you needed my help. That's no longer necessary. I lowered my head, fighting back tears. I've signed the divorce papers, so this kid. My heart ached, but I forced myself to be ruthless. There's no need for it. Besides, it'd just be trouble for you. Trouble, Leo chuckled softly. Samantha, he is a life. He's my blood. But he's just an embryo now. I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down my face. If he's gone, it won't hurt that much. Leo, you don't want me. And now you don't even want my kid. There isn't another woman more heartless than you. It was just a transaction, Leo. Don't you get it? Transaction. Do you think I'd hook up with a woman just for some so-called transaction? Do you think transaction, Leo? Don't you get it? Transaction. Do you think I, Leo, would let any woman carry my kid so easily? He stepped forward and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. Samantha, did you think I went to Mike's to recover? Do you think any woman can soften me with a few tears? Do you think anyone can touch these coral beads? Can get into my bed? He let go of my chin and instead held my cold hand against his chest. Samantha, didn't you feel anything when I kissed you that first night? I stared, my vision blurred. His face was still as handsome as ever, but in his eyes there was a restrained tenderness. I thought about how Leo had kept to himself after coming to Mike's, but that day, he opened the gate and approached me, crying. I remembered the handkerchief he gave me, the humidifier I sent that he kept on his desk, how he buttoned my coat and wrapped my scarf on that cold night, what he said to Mike the day we left, the card and letter he left for me. Everything made sense now, but I never thought in that direction. No, I dared not think, with my dark mindset, the Samantha who, as Mike said, had taken the wrong path out of desperation, could be quietly loved and pitied by someone. Leo raised his hand and gently wiped away my tears. Go back. Take a shower and get some rest. I'll handle everything else. He held my hand, getting ready to leave, but I didn't move. Why, Leo? I don't believe in love at first sight. Leo looked at me, then suddenly smiled softly. I don't believe in it either. Then why? He stood under the hallway light, his thin face cast in shadows. He didn't look at me, just touched the coral beads on his wrist. After a long time, he spoke slowly. I haven't been in good health. My elders always worried I wouldn't have kids. He removed the beads and offered them to me. I had them blessed this time. Wearing them will protect you and the baby. I stared at the blood-red beads in his long fingers, feeling a mix of relief and pain. So that's it. It's all for the baby. Leo put the coral beads on my wrist. Come with me. I was indeed exhausted, completely drained. He wasn't even in the city, and the clinic still wouldn't dare touch me. Now that he was here, I knew there was no use resisting. I followed him downstairs to the car. Leo held my hand the whole time. Even once in the car, he didn't let go. Samantha, come back south with me. What for? To be your mistress like in the old days? I chuckled bitterly. Mike's fam already looked down on me, let alone Leo. Thinking back, Mike's fam's attitude in front of him wasn't as polite as I thought. Even Mike must really fear this fourth brother. You wouldn't marry me, would you? I looked at him, my smile not reaching my eyes. If you want to get married, forget it. I know better. I cut him off. Before he could finish, right now, I don't want to think about love or marriage. I just want to live freely. Isn't it ridiculous? I can't even decide whether or not to keep the kid in my belly. But who can I blame? I was the one who approached Leo. You reap what you sow. I can only swallow this bitter fruit myself. Now my only worry is, if I must give birth, Leo will definitely take the kid home. And I, after enduring the hardships of 10 months of pregnancy and childbirth, might not be able to let go. Leo first took me to Mike's villa to pack my luggage. Then he drove me to his place in North City overnight. The house wasn't huge, but it was classy. I stayed with Leo in the main courtyard in the southeast corner, entering the courtyard and stepping into the front hall. The first thing I saw was a massive desk. It was still full of books and articles to be copied. The weirdest thing was, in one corner of the desk, there was still the little duck humidifier I had given him. Such a childish thing seemed so out of place in the room. I thought he hadn't taken it with him when he left. I couldn't help but glance at Leo. Leo handed his coat to the servant and said casually, North City is too dry. I wasn't used to it, so I kept using it. Before I could say anything, he called a servant to take me to the room to freshen up. But it wasn't the guest room, it was the master suite. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, Leo and I had already been intimate multiple times, and now I was carrying his kids, so no need to be coy. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out of the shower, the servants had already prepped new clean loungewear. After changing, I went downstairs to eat. Leo was still at his desk, working. By the time I finished my chicken soup, he had just set down his writing brush. Our eyes met, and I suddenly remembered that small courtyard at Mike's place, the soft couch behind the desk, and Leo, who I had pinned underneath me. He looked so lean, his skin slightly pale, with a thin layer of calluses on his fingers from years of writing. Yet he was surprisingly strong. A strange heat spread in my abdomen, and I quickly averted my gaze. But Leo had already walked around the desk to me. I'm full, I'll head upstairs. Before I could finish speaking, Leo grabbed my chin, forcing me to look up. He leaned down and kissed me, covering my wide-open eyes with his other hand. Samantha. He kissed my lips, sucking and licking gently. Open your mouth, the heating's too warm. Soon I was sweat-covered. My wet fingertips clung to his back, then limply fell to the bedside. His back had a layer of lean, beautiful muscle. His waist was narrow, showing the outlines of his abs, with a sexy V-line. In a fleeting moment of clarity before surrender, I couldn't help but think, Leo said he wasn't in good health, and his elders worried about his future progeny, but now he didn't look like someone with poor health. Leo, maybe because of my messed up thoughts at that moment, I blurted out, "Aren't you in bad health?" He leaned down and kissed me, with a touch of laughter in his voice. Samantha, be considerate of me. Considerate of what? Shouldn't I be the one who needs consideration? I'm pregnant. He held my waist, his slender fingers trailing downward from my abdomen, finally gripping my ankle lightly and lifting it. Newly awakened desires remain insatiably hungry for a long time. Oh, have you never done this before? I'm not in good health. I must abstain and cultivate. Then why are you doing this now? Aren't you risking your life? It's different now. How's it different? Now it's time for yin and yang to balance. Leo, good girl, I know my limits. You're carrying our kid, I promise. This is the last time. The last time for tonight. Leo, Samantha, kiss me. Leo lowered his head, sucking on my earlobe. I seemed enchanted, mindlessly lifting my face to kiss his throat, and that kiss led to a seemingly endless last time. After that night, my relationship with Leo seemed to undergo a subtle change. Every day, without fail, he would read for 2 hours, but unlike before, when he stood alone at his desk, finishing in one go, now he sat in a round chair with me on his lap, one hand holding the brush, the other arm around my waist. The scriptures got copied, but by the end, his writing was messy. Even the once tidy desk now lay in disarray. Sometimes I couldn't help but feel blurred, as if this man had no earthly desires. He seemed detached from love and lust, yet with that face, he could do the worst things. Leo, does Buddha know you act like this in private? I'm just a registered disciple, not a monk. What is there to fear? Leo lifted me from the desk. Shall I take you there this afternoon? Mike needs me to sign some papers about inheritance and stock transfer. Because of our shared secrets and interests, our interactions had become quite harmonious lately. The other day, Mike even said over the phone that once everything was settled, he would transfer $1 million to me. I didn't refuse. Money might not be everything, but it's definitely useful. Breaking free from Mike and starting a new life, I needed cash. The driver can take me after all. My divorce from Mike isn't public yet. I didn't want to cause unnecessary drama. No matter what, Leo was still related to Mike's fam. Leo didn't say anything, just looked down and gently touched the coral beads on my wrist. Don't take this off. There's no harm in keeping it on. It's hidden under my sleeve anyway. Okay, I won't take it off. But Leo still looked a bit unhappy. When I left in the afternoon, he didn't come out of his study. As the car drove out of the gate, I couldn't resist turning back to look. I saw Leo's lean figure standing on the steps outside the courtyard, watching in the direction my car was heading. For some reason, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, a lot of life's troubles come from overthinking. Since no one really knows what the future holds, why not just enjoy the present? At least these days with Leo have been truly incredibly happy. A person like him with his background is like a noble, cool moon, just hanging in the sky. Why should I get greedy and try to pull him down into my arms? Winter clothes are thick, so it wasn't until we were inside signing the papers that Mike noticed my slightly swollen belly. He tried to say something several times but held back until the papers were all signed. After the lawyer and the secretary left, he finally spoke up. Pointing at my belly, he said, "You haven't been to the clinic yet? The baby's father isn't in good health. Their family line depends on him, so they begged me not to abort the kid. But don't worry, I'll soon go south to take care of the pregnancy and give birth. I won't cause any trouble or burden for you and Jenny or your soon-to-be-born kid." Mike's face showed some unmistakable exhaustion and fatigue. Samantha. He slowly sat down on the couch across from me. Jenny lost the kid. We're still hiding it from the elders. What? How come? I was surprised. She's always been in poor health. Even staying in the clinic and being extra cautious didn't help. She still had a miscarriage. The doc says it's due to her physical condition. Having another kid will be very tough. Very tough. Mike leaned back on the couch and covered his face with his hand, then laughed mockingly at himself. Maybe this is just karma. Samantha, I've been really tired recently. Jenny's been devastated by the loss of the kid. She's completely broken down, acting crazy and irrational. I promised her I would marry her even without the kid, but she doesn't believe me. Right now, with the shares and inheritance not settled, I can't publicly divorce her, nor can I legally marry her. But she just doesn't understand. Mike's expression gradually turned cold and hard. I've had enough of these days. If she keeps acting like this, we can only part ways. I was very surprised, but after the initial shock, I felt this was something Mike would do. In their circle, Mike was remarkably loyal to Jenny. I heard that over the years, Mike really had no other woman besides Jenny. I should go back now, Mike. You don't need to talk to me about your problems. I don't want to hear them. I don't want to hear them, Samantha. Mike looked at me. If that day Jenny called me, and you didn't let me go, if I stayed between us. Mike, there's no if. I calmly interrupted him. Jenny was always there in our marriage, unchangeable, so our ending was always destined. You really like that guy, huh? Mike's gaze lingered on my wrist for a moment, then dropped to my belly. Samantha, the day at the clinic, by Grandma's bed, I knew you were pregnant. He suddenly laughed bitterly. At that moment, I wanted to kill him. If that guy was standing in front of me, I would have stabbed him. But after calming down, I thought it through. What right do I have to be angry or upset? This is just my karma. Samantha, marrying me has put you through a lot, and now you're still willing to help me. Mike's tone was sincere. I feel really bad about it. No need to feel bad. Aren't you giving me $1 million? I joked with a smile. $1 million is quite a lot for me, really. Right after I finished speaking, my phone rang. It was Leo calling. I didn't answer and just stood up to leave. The driver is urging me. I have to go, Mike. Outside the room, I finally pressed to answer the call. Leo's voice was deep and tempting. Samantha, why are you taking so long? I'm just about to get in the elevator. I'm waiting in the car. Leo, why are you here? Am I that invisible to you? What are you talking about? I couldn't help but laugh. As I walked into the elevator and turned to press the floor number, I saw Mike standing not far off, watching me talk on the phone. I was startled for a moment, and as the elevator doors slowly closed, Mike's figure gradually disappeared. Out of the elevator, across the lobby, I saw Leo's incredibly expensive luxury car right away. I walked down the steps quickly, and the car door suddenly opened. Leo, dressed in a deep gray business suit, with cold and distant eyes, walked up to me. Samantha, you're pregnant, and you're still hopping down the steps. Don't worry, the last checkup showed your kid is very good and growing well. I looked up at him. In the future, I might rely on the kid to gain some status. I'll be careful. Samantha, why not rely on the kid for your status? I paused, trying to change the subject, but Leo pulled me into his arms. The elders already warned me. Our kid can't be born without proper status. He must have a legit identity. So, once we get home, we'll register our marriage. I didn't lift my eyes to look at him, just stared at the intricate patterns on his suit coat buttons until my eyes stung. I don't agree. I'll propose first, then get engaged. There will be an engagement ceremony, a marriage certificate ceremony, a wedding. Every step won't be missed because of the kid. My eyes turned red as I tried to push him away. Leo held me tighter, lowering his head to kiss my forehead gently. Because of Samantha. The day before Leo took me south, Mike transferred $1 million to my account. On the phone, he said, "Actually, the day I saw you sign the papers, I noticed the coral beads on your wrist. Those were my fourth brothers. He always had them with him. How could I not recognize them? Mike, now that I think about it, when my fourth brother returned to Hong Kong and said those things, they all had deeper meanings. Samantha, you're a good girl. You deserve my fourth brother." After Mike hung up, I noticed my bank balance showed 11 million. I was very surprised. That bank card was the one I gave to Leo, but Leo had returned it. I always thought there was only my million on top. On the plane back south, I leaned against Leo's chest. Half asleep, I asked him, "Why did you give me so much money?" "So you wouldn't suffer. So at least you'd have enough to not endure hardship. Why did you give me your number?" "Were you sure I'd call?" "I hoped you would, but also didn't." Leo stroked my hair. "I wanted to come get you, but I was afraid you'd really be treated so badly." Leo. I couldn't help but bury myself in his chest. He smelled so good, a faint sandalwood scent. It put me at ease. Before I knew it, I fell asleep in his arms. Leo covered me with a blanket, holding me tight, never letting go. He didn't believe in love at first sight. But the first time he saw Samantha, when he was young, he fell for her. The second time he saw her, he swore he would marry her. But Samantha had long forgotten him. That young girl back then, joyfully telling her best friend how she had a crush on him. She didn't know how happy he was when he heard those words. But later, he was suddenly taken back to Harbor City by his parents. When he finally had a chance to come back and look for her, she had already fallen for an older guy who played basketball. She watched him play every day. He stayed for 3 days, angry for 3 days, and never found her. After returning to Harbor City, he cut off contact with all his classmates. Years later, he saw her again, at her wedding with Mike. She was completely different from before. Her eyes didn't smile, shrouded in deep sadness. Her brows always furrowed. And later he heard from Mike's servant that on the wedding night, Mike didn't come home. He was at the Peninsula Hotel with his first love for 2 whole years. He was furious and worried about her. So he found an excuse, staying in North City temporarily. Later, when she was secretly crying in the garden, he couldn't help but walk out. But Leo never expected Samantha to make that kind of request to him. He had no way to refuse the girl he had liked since he was young. He regretted, despised himself for that, but in the end, he was incredibly grateful for compromising back then. What could be better than having the one you like sleeping in your arms? With their kid in her belly, Leo couldn't resist lowering his head to kiss her forehead. At lunchtime, when the stewardess courteously asked, Leo gently smiled, lowering his voice. "My wife is asleep. Please don't disturb us until she wakes up." The young and beautiful stewardess glanced enviously at the woman in his arms, asleep, her brows relaxed, her mouth slightly curving up. And the man holding her, noble in appearance, elegant in manners, wore a simple wedding ring on his long fingers, while on her wrist there was only a stunning string of coral beads. Her skin was so fair, the beads on her wrist unbelievably beautiful. Maybe many years later, the stewardess would still remember this happy newlywed couple. And years later, Leo and Samantha had a son and a daughter, and they remained as loving as ever. You see, the moon can be brought down. When Mike met the one he was willing to land for, no matter the distance, he would make his way to her, fall into her arms,